My daughter told me not to come to her wedding. She said it would be better if I just stayed away. So I followed her, and when I saw the man she was marrying, my heart didn't skip a beat. It stopped, because I was staring at a ghost from a nightmare I'd spent 20 years trying to bury. Before I tell you what happened next, hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Elias. I'm 62 years old, and my world is my garage. Basswood, sawdust, and the quiet precision of architectural models. Every beam fits. Every angle is exact. It's the one place life still makes sense. On my workbench sits a photo of Chloe at 6 years old, gap-toothed, gripping my hand like it was the safest place in the world. Lately, I wasn't sure she remembered what that felt like. The call came on a Tuesday. "I'm engaged," she said. And for one pure moment, I felt nothing but joy. His name was Julian, she told me. Smart, driven, big in real estate. "When do I get to meet him?" I asked. A pause, just a beat too long. "Soon, Dad. It's a whirlwind right now." I didn't know how it was. I didn't know how you could be so swept up you couldn't find 5 minutes for the man who raised you. The excuses piled up for weeks. His family was old money, very private. Julian was in Singapore closing deals. They were swamped with wedding planning, each one polished, each one hollow. I wasn't angry. Anger is fast and hot. This was slower, colder, a creeping sense that the foundation between us was cracking. It finally broke on a quiet afternoon. I called and cut through the noise. "I don't need a fancy dinner, Chloe. 10 minutes at a coffee shop. I just need to meet him." Silence. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from her, brittle, cornered, she said it. "Maybe it's better if you don't come to the wedding." The words hung there, obscene and unbelievable. She kept talking, filling my silence with knives. The Crofts were a big deal. They moved in different circles. My situation, my small business, my simple life would be awkward. Awkward. The word you use for a stain on a carpet. Not for the man who taught her to ride a bike, who stayed up nights building a solar system model with her, who quietly sold his own company to pay for her college without ever telling her the cost. I hung up. I didn't say a word. There was nothing left to say. But sitting alone in my workshop afterward, something shifted. The rage never came. Instead, a strange clarity did. I know stress points. I know load-bearing walls. And the way Chloe had delivered those excuses didn't sound like shame. It sounded like fear. A powerful family doesn't build a frantic wall to keep out a quiet father-in-law. They tolerate him, or ignore him. That kind of desperate effort only comes from something being hidden. My daughter wasn't the architect of this cruelty. She was trapped inside someone else's design. I remembered one detail she'd let slip weeks earlier. Wednesdays were her big client lunch days, always somewhere downtown and impressive. It was enough. I put on plain clothes, drove my old Ford into the city, and staked out a coffee shop across from the restaurant she'd mentioned. When Chloe arrived, dressed like money, I saw it, a flicker of fear behind the confidence. She was playing a part. I watched a young man arrive. Dark hair, tailored navy suit, a smile built for magazine covers. Julian. Charming, entitled, everything I wasn't. For one terrible second, I almost believed this was only about class. Then an older man approached their table, silver-haired, moving like a lion surveying his kingdom. He placed a hand on Julian's shoulder. He turned his head into the light. My heart didn't skip. It stopped. I knew that face. I'd seen it every night in nightmares for a decade, then carried it like a scar for a decade more. Julian Croft. The man who, 20 years ago, slid a fraudulent contract across a table and destroyed my architecture firm, my reputation, and very nearly my marriage. He hadn't just returned, he'd thrived, and now his son was marrying my daughter. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a message. They had known exactly who Chloe was, the secrecy, the excuses, the shame in her voice. None of it was about me being an embarrassment. It was about silencing a witness. My daughter wasn't falling in love. She was being used as the final piece in Julian Croft's 20-year victory lap. The grief burned away into something harder. This wasn't a wedding. It was a war, and I'd just identified the enemy. I drove straight to the one man I still trusted, David Rios, my old CFO, now a forensic accountant in a cluttered office on the west side. I told him everything. When I said the name Croft, something dark passed over his face. "The Phoenix Project," he said. I thought he'd have disappeared by now. He hadn't disappeared, he'd evolved. For 3 days, David's office became our war room. He pulled SEC filings, shell corporations, property records. I brought the architect's eye, reading construction timelines, zoning permits, geological realities. A 40-story tower promised in 18 months on impossible bedrock. A 90% leased commercial center that was, according to satellite images, an empty field. Croft wasn't building anything. He was building ghosts. It was a Ponzi scheme on a staggering scale. New investor money used to pay off old investors, buying just enough trust to attract the next, bigger round. And the numbers didn't lie. The outflow now exceeded the inflow. Croft was insolvent, maybe 2 or 3 months from total collapse. He needed one final, massive injection of cash, and a story stable enough to attract it. That's when it clicked. The wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a stage. The guest list wasn't friends and family. It was hedge fund billionaires, private equity partners, the biggest sharks in the city, all gathered in one glittering room to be sold Croft's last and greatest lie. And Chloe, beautiful, smart, trusted, was the human face of his legitimacy. The bride wasn't marrying into a family. She was collateral in a fraud. Going to the FBI would take months we didn't have. The wedding was in days, and the moment Croft sensed an investigation, he'd vanish offshore with a fortune and a bank of ruined pensions behind him. We had one shot, and it had to happen inside the wedding itself. So we built a weapon, a dossier. Not a pile of confusing documents, but a clean, devastating narrative. Bank transfers between shell companies, satellite photos of empty lots beside falsified progress reports, annotated contracts with forged signatures highlighted in plain sight. We called it Project Phoenix. He'd burned my life to ash once. It was time something rose from it. Getting it into the right hands meant getting past a fortress of security, so I didn't sneak in. I became invisible. I called Gary, an old contact who now ran the catering company hired for the wedding, spun a story about a consulting gig falling through, and by Saturday, I was standing at the hotel's service entrance in a black jacket and bow tie, a tray of champagne in my hand. The ballroom was a monument to manufactured wealth, chandeliers like crystal waterfalls, orchids with no scent, an ice sculpture already weeping under the lights. Croft moved through the crowd like a king holding court. His son played the doting fiancé, his smile vanishing into boredom the instant Chloe looked away. And Chloe, my Chloe, wore the mask I taught her to smile with, not the real one. I knew the difference. Underneath the silk and the perfect hair, she looked like a prisoner on the happiest day of her life. Then the toast began. Croft took the stage, talking about family, trust, legacy. Every word soaked in the hypocrisy of a man selling the very lie that would ruin the people listening to him. This was my window. My target was Table 1, Marcus Harrison, 75 years old, the most cautious, most respected investor in the room. If he pulled out, the whole scheme collapsed on the spot. I moved toward his table with a water pitcher, my heart hammering, my hands steady. As I refilled his glass, I let it slip, a splash of water across the tablecloth, gasps, a flurry of apology. Under the cover of dabbing it dry, I swapped his menu for the identical one hiding Project Phoenix inside. It took less than a second. As I straightened, I met his eyes for one heartbeat too long. Not an apology, a command. Look inside. Something sharp crossed his face. He knew. I melted back into the crowd of staff and watched. Harrison opened the folder. Confusion. Then a stillness that spread across his face like frost. He closed it, caught the eye of the man beside him, and rose without a word, phone already in hand. That man read it next. Same reaction, same silent fury, already texting. A quiet, invisible panic rippled outward from table to table, while Croft, still on stage, still smiling, had no idea his empire had just evaporated in front of him. Then the music stopped, not faded, shattered. 4 men in plain dark suits walked through the doors with the calm of people who never announce themselves. They crossed the room, past my daughter frozen in white silk, straight to Julian Croft. A few quiet words. The color drained from his face. No shouting, no struggle. Just the sound of an empire ending in silence. I stepped out from the shadows, shrugged off the server's jacket, and walked straight to my daughter. I didn't explain. I draped my coat over her trembling shoulders and said only, "Let's go home." Later, in my kitchen, I handed her a warm mug of tea. The silence between us wasn't distance anymore. It was the quiet space where healing finally begins. This story is a reminder that real strength isn't loud, and it isn't measured by money. It's built quietly, over a lifetime, the same way you'd frame a house, beam by beam, joint by joint, until it can hold up anything. An overlooked father, dismissed as too simple, too small, too awkward, turned out to be the only one with the precision to bring down a fortress of lies. Love doesn't always rescue with a shout. Sometimes it saves everything with one perfectly placed, perfectly silent plan. If you believe the quietest moves are often the most powerful ones, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you'd have done in Elias's place.